Kiwi. Time to talk the high-tech stories of the week. We do it with Paul Brislen over at twitter.com/Paul Brislen, joining us via live Skype video on the iPad this morning. Morning, Paul.
G'day, how you doing?
Good. And a little bit later on in the segment, we'll explain why the iPad is not the most wanted gadget of the moment. It is something else. but first up, I guess the top story would have to be Steve Jobs. I thought there'd been a terrorist attack or something on Twitter, because Twitter suddenly went crazy, but no, it was the resignation of Steve.
Much more important than that. It was Steve Jobs handing in his notice as CEO of Apple, which for the geek world is actually fairly serious business. And given what he's done with Apple since he came back to take over the reins all those years ago now, it is really quite remarkable. He's not been well, of course. He's had he's battled pancreatic cancer, and he's had a liver transplant. So the feeling is that everybody's writing his obituary at the moment, which is a little bit of a strange world to be in. If you're Steve at the moment, I would suggest.
Yeah, it would be. Now he has stepped down from these important roles before because of his health, hasn't he? But he's always kind of still had his fingers in the pies.
Well, that's right. He still will. He's going to be chairman of the board. So it's a lot more of a hands-on role in the US than it is over here. Here, the chairman of a board tends to set governance principles and that kind of thing, and leave the day-to-day running to the CEO.
Right.
Over there, they're a bit more involved. Although it does sound like he'll be leaving most of it up to the new CEO, Tim Cook, who has, of course, stepped in several times before and done a sterling job of steering the ship while Steve's been away. But the question remains, of course, what will this do to Apple? Because it is clearly Steve's company. He's led it, he's driven it, he's changed it, and in doing so, he's reinvented not only Apple, but the IT world as we know it today, which is no mean feat.
I guess some people would be sceptical, though, about how can only just one man hold a company that's so enormous that, in fact, recently we found that they had more cash than the US government. I mean, can it really be down to one man? The whole design of gadgets, from the iPhone right back to the iMac, is it all down to him?
I heard a story a few years ago about the iPhone, the launch of the iPhone, and what Steve did was hold up the launch because he didn't like the way the box moved too quickly when you slid the lid off it. And if you've ever opened an iPhone box, you'll know that it slides very gently and takes at least 5 seconds to open.
Yeah.
And he wanted that, and he led that. And if he's that interested in the design features of the cardboard box that your phone comes in, yes, he's very much a hands-on guy. Okay. He's somewhat renowned as a bit of a control freak. And to all intents and purposes, Apple runs at Steve's whim and will. And without Steve there, the share market in particular will be asking just what is going to happen next.
Of course, he doesn't give a lot of media interviews at all, does he? He doesn't really talk much outside of the company.
No, that's right. I mean, aside from appearing in fairly heavily stage-managed productions like the launch events that go on at Macworld and these kinds of events, he really gives very few interviews these days, and it's very hard to know just what it is that he's thinking and what direction the company will take. And as you've seen, to come back from the dead, as it were. I'm talking about Apple now, not Steve.
Yeah.
Where they were absolutely languishing in the market to become as powerful as they are today. First of all through a music player, the iPod, which stormed the world. And then through reinventing the cell phone, and now finally the product that he wanted all along, the iPad. A slate which is absolutely changing the face of computing, as we've seen with Hewlett-Packard this week.
Well, I'll tell you what, one great rediscovery yesterday with all the Steve Jobs chatter was seeing, and I remember seeing it years ago, but his Stanford University address, a very inspirational 15 minutes where you actually get some insight into some of his early life before Apple and then also through Apple, but also what drives him and also what he thinks is the recipe for success as well. Very inspirational, and it's up there on YouTube. I recommend anyone to just search for Steve Jobs Stanford and you'll find that.
Yeah, it's very cool, very interesting. Really gives you an insight into his character, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Well, there's been another high-profile resignation. Well, I guess high-profile depending on what circles you run in. But yeah, tell us about this one.
Yes, this is Commander Taco. Possibly just as influential as Steve Jobs. Commander Taco is one of the two guys who set up Slashdot, which for most of the human race is a sort of a what? Why do we what? It's a website. It's what?
Yeah.
They can't find it online because of course Slashdot is a word, not a slash and a dot.
Yes.
So that makes life a bit tricky for them. But Slashdot has been possibly the most influential tech site for the better part of 15 years. And both the two founders, Hemos and Commander Taco, have now resigned and moved on to other things. And it really is the end of an era, I think. I had a quick look at Slashdot this morning. It's basically it's a website that pulls together stories that Taco always thought was, well, that's interesting. I'll share that with a few friends. And a few friends became so many people around the world that you'd end up with a situation where if a story appeared on Slashdot, the website that was hosting it would typically crash under the pressure of the entire population of geeks around the world tuning in to have a look.
Yeah.
And I did this myself with the Herald website a few years ago with a story about Ben Goodger, who's a Kiwi guy who's helped create Firefox, the web browser.
Yeah.
And because Slashdot linked to the Herald's website, it had, I think at the time, it was 11 times the traffic of the biggest story that the Herald had ever had online at that time.
The Slashdot effect.
Yeah. And Slashdotting of websites became a great way to stress test your network to see whether or not it could stand up to use, which is quite something for one simple website in the US. They sold it in '99 to a company called Andover, and I hope they got some money for it. It was at the height of the .com bubble, so I'm trusting that they did. And it's still there. It's going strong. And if you ever want to know anything about the tech world, open up the stories, but never read the comments because they are usually quite strange and go off on a tangent quite quickly.
Yeah, I should never read the comments anywhere, really, on anything.
Never read. Yeah, I mean, Slashdot did very well. They had a moderation system, so it allows you to set the threshold you want. So that you can get rid of posts by anonymous people. You can include posts from people who have a fairly high karma rating. They had a karma mechanism. And that's worked really well, because you can then filter out most of the nonsense and keep in most of the good stuff, which is quite good.
Okay, all right. And finally, on to the story we teased at the top there about what is the most wanted gadget of the moment. Not of all time or this year or this month, but probably right now the most wanted gadget. Paul.
It's the Hewlett-Packard tablet, which looks an awful lot like an iPad, and which Hewlett-Packard discontinued dramatically this week. HP's undergoing something of a crisis of confidence at the moment. They're getting rid of their PC industry by the look of it. HP makes computers. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So that's disappearing. And we've got their Touchpad computers, their Slate. It looks like an iPad, basically, which they've discontinued. Now, the Slate was built on WebOS, which is what came out of Palm. You remember the Palm pilot all those years ago?
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of come full circle, and HP bought them for over $1 billion not so long ago. Now they've discontinued the whole thing. So
they only just bought it out. They only just it was only just released, right?
That's right. It's the HP way. Release something and cancel it, and then it becomes a huge hit. Yeah. But there was a huge rush of people trying to buy these things because they were being sold off apparently for only $100 or a couple of $100 each. But by the time anybody got to the stores, the staff in all the retail outlets had snagged them all and made off with them. And that was that. There's not a one to be seen anywhere in New Zealand. I'm keeping an eye on Trade Me to see if any pop up. And you can imagine they'd sell quite nicely because you'd make a healthy profit. They'd still be half the price of an iPad.
I guess
Quite remarkable.
I guess for an ultra geek, and I know a lot of ultra geeks have what are the tech museum bookshelves where old technology. I guess the HP Touchpad would go straight to the bookshelf.
That's right, straight in there next to the Apple Newton, which is sort of the halcyon days of the computer where you couldn't do anything with it and it was useless, but you've got one, so that's good.
Yeah.
I'd like to see HP open up the WebOS source code, make it free to all, much like the Mozilla Foundation did with Netscape all those years ago. And just see what people can do with it, because otherwise those people who have got it is a bit of a dead end. You'll be able to do stuff with it for a while, but there'll be no more updates, and there'll be no more applications for it, and it'll all just peter out eventually.
I did hear yesterday that that Hulu, which is a TV streaming service in the States, noticed a whole lot of touchpads connecting to their website, so they immediately blocked the HP Touchpad from connecting to them, because I think that they want people to buy their app or subscribe to a premium service or something. But that just shows like the overwhelming kind of power of people wanting this gadget that they didn't know they wanted.
That's right. And a $500 price point was too much, but $100, well, that's fantastic. I'll have one of those things. Yeah. So hopefully it'll open up the way and somebody will realise there's a market for devices at that kind of size.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, of course, you've got to fight the patent wars, and we won't be seeing the likes of Samsung bring too many tablets out if they keep getting sued by Apple and vice versa. So, there's a long way to go on that score. But clearly there's a market there for a low-cost, low-price tablet.
Indeed. We'll continue the conversation with Paul over on Twitter, twitter.com/Paul Brislen. And thanks very much. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Take care.
See ya.